What if I told you the food sitting quietly on the bottom shelf of your grocery store, the one you've probably walked past 1,000 times without a second glance, might do more for your muscles after 70 than the eggs you eat every morning? Stay with me because by the end of this video, your grocery list is going to look completely different. I'm Dr. William Lee. I love eggs. I've talked about them on this channel before, and they're genuinely a great source of protein. But recent research has been pointing at something surprising. A handful of everyday, inexpensive foods may actually support muscle maintenance in older adults just as well, sometimes even better, than eggs do. And most of them cost less than $2. Today, I want to walk you through 6 of these foods, from genuinely useful all the way to the one I think deserves a permanent spot on every senior shopping list. I'll tell you exactly how to prepare each one, what to pair it with, and why it matters specifically for a body past 70. And stay to the very end, because the last one on this list connects to something researchers only started understanding well in the past few years, and it might be the most important tip in this entire video. Before we start, tell me honestly in the comments, how old are you? And what does muscle loss actually feel like day to day for you? Trouble getting up from a chair? Struggling on stairs? Feeling a little unsteady on your feet? I read every comment, genuinely, and it shapes what I make next. Why this matters more than most people realize. Here's the piece almost nobody explains clearly. Past 70, muscle stops responding to protein the way it used to. Researchers call this anabolic resistance. Think of it as a door that used to swing open with a light push and now needs steady, sustained pressure before it budges at all. You can eat enough protein on paper and still lose strength because the type of protein, how fast it's absorbed, and what it's paired with all matter almost as much as the amount. That's really the heart of today's video. 6 foods, all affordable, all easy to find, each one working through a slightly different mechanism to help an aging body actually use protein rather than let a good chunk of it go to waste. Let's count down from 6 to 1. 6. Cottage cheese. I know, cottage cheese sounds like something from a 1970s diet plan, but what's inside it is anything but outdated. Cottage cheese is one of the richest everyday sources of casein, a slow-digesting protein that trickles amino acids into the bloodstream over several hours instead of all at once. For a younger athlete, that slow release is a nice bonus for overnight recovery. For someone past 70 dealing with anabolic resistance, it's arguably more important than that. Fast proteins like whey hit the bloodstream quickly and fade before resistant, aging muscle has had enough time to really respond. Casein keeps gently knocking on that door for hours instead of one quick tap. Research comparing protein types before sleep in older adults found that casein led to noticeably better overnight muscle repair compared with faster proteins or no protein at all. A real advantage for a body already working hard to hold on to muscle day after day. How to use it. About 3/4 of a cup of full-fat cottage cheese, full fat specifically since the fat slows digestion even further and stretches out that overnight repair window, eaten within half an hour of bed. A teaspoon of honey stirred in is a nice pairing too. Some research suggests the natural sugars create a gentle, steady insulin response that may help usher those amino acids into muscle cells a bit more efficiently. Think of insulin here not as a villain, but as a delivery driver, getting the protein to the right address. 5. Canned tuna. This one has one of the best value for money profiles of anything in the whole supermarket because of a single amino acid called leucine. Leucine is essentially the ignition key for muscle protein synthesis. Without enough of it in a meal, the whole process of building or repairing muscle barely gets started, no matter how much total protein you've eaten. A small can of tuna in water carries a solid dose of complete protein, with leucine content that ranks among the highest of any everyday whole food, for around $1. For anyone on a fixed income trying to protect their physical independence, that's genuinely remarkable value. Here's the detail that matters. Research on leucine thresholds in older adults suggests people past 65 need meaningfully more leucine per meal than someone in their 30s to actually trigger the muscle building response. The door needs a firmer push, remember. A single can of tuna lands right around that higher threshold aging muscles seem to need. How to use it? 1 can at lunch, 3 or 4 times a week. And don't drain all the liquid. Leave a small amount in the can since some water-soluble nutrients seep into that liquid during canning and are worth keeping. A drizzle of olive oil over the top is a smart pairing too. Compounds in olive oil appear to ease inflammation around muscle cell membranes, part of what drives anabolic resistance in the first place, which may make the leucine in the tuna work a bit more effectively. It's a combination Mediterranean cooking has leaned on for generations, and it turns out there's a real reason behind it. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Diane, 78, who'd been eating tuna on rice cakes with low-fat mayonnaise for years, genuinely believing she was doing everything right. When she came to see me, she'd lost a meaningful amount of lean muscle over 4 years, and her family had started noticing real frailty. Upgraded her approach, full fat preparation, olive oil, tuna anchoring her lunch, and gradually added a few of the other foods on this list. At her 6-month check-in, her lean mass had genuinely increased and her grip strength had improved noticeably. Her daughter told me Diane had started tending her garden again. That's really the whole reason I make these videos. 4. Black beans. This is the one that might make the plant protein skeptics in the audience reconsider. Black beans cost around $1.50 a pound dried, and in research comparing muscle protein synthesis, they've held their own remarkably well against animal protein when prepared the right way. And I'll tell you exactly how in a moment. The usual objection is fair on its own. Plant proteins are often incomplete, missing one or more essential amino acids. True in isolation, but black beans bring something else to the table entirely, a type of carbohydrate called resistant starch, which skips normal digestion and instead feeds beneficial gut bacteria, which in turn produce compounds that calm inflammation in the gut lining. Past 70, gut inflammation tends to rise, and that inflammation is closely tied to how severe anabolic resistance becomes in muscle tissue. The gut and the muscles are, in a real sense, in constant conversation through these inflammatory signals, and black beans help quiet some of that noise. Research following older adults found that those eating legumes, black beans among them, several times a week held on to meaningfully more lean muscle over several years compared with those eating few legumes. And interestingly, this held even after accounting for total protein intake, suggesting something beyond the protein itself is doing real work here. How to use it? Cook dried beans rather than canned when you can. They hold on to more of that resistant starch. A half cup 3 to 5 times a week, ideally at lunch. And the pairing here genuinely matters. Eat your black beans with brown rice at the same meal. Rice supplies an amino acid beans are short on, and beans supply one rice is short on. Together, they form a genuinely complete amino acid profile, a combination researchers have specifically used to demonstrate this complete package effect. Together, they're also about as cheap as complete protein gets anywhere in the store. Quick pause before the top 3, including the food I promised you at the start. If something here has genuinely surprised you, or explained something your own doctor never had time to, take a second to like this video and subscribe if you haven't. It genuinely helps this reach more people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who deserve real, usable information instead of a vague shrug. Thank you, truly. 3. Canned sardines, bones and all. This is the one I recommend to nearly every patient over 70 who comes to me worried about muscle loss. And I usually get a puzzled look followed by, "That's it?" Yes, genuinely, that's it. The key here is a compound called carnosine, found in concentrated amounts almost exclusively in animal muscle tissue, and sardines carry some of the highest levels of any commonly eaten food. Carnosine helps buffer the acid that naturally builds up inside muscle fibers during any physical activity, even ordinary daily movement. That acid buildup is a big part of why older muscles tire quickly and recover slowly. Research on carnosine in older adults, whether from supplements or from eating carnosine-rich food like sardines regularly, has linked it to reduced muscle fatigue and better real-world movement capacity over several months. Walking, standing, the things that actually matter day to day. Beyond carnosine, sardines deliver a solid amount of complete protein per can, a strong dose of vitamin D, calcium from the soft edible bones, and CoQ10, a compound that helps power the tiny energy factories inside muscle cells, the mitochondria. CoQ10 levels in muscle tissue decline meaningfully with age, and that decline is closely tied to the kind of fatigue that makes ordinary movement feel like wading through mud. How to use it: 1 tin of sardines in olive oil 4 times a week. And yes, eat the bones. They're soft, completely safe, and a genuinely good calcium source, important for the electrical signal that triggers every single muscle contraction. A squeeze of lemon and a side of something fermented, kimchi or sauerkraut, makes a nice pairing. The beneficial bacteria in fermented foods appear to support gut absorption of the sardine protein and may help the body make better use of that CoQ10. 2. Firm tofu. I think this represents one of the biggest missed opportunities in how older adults in many Western countries eat. Genuinely. Tofu is affordable, available everywhere, eaten daily in some of the populations with the lowest rates of age-related muscle loss on record, and it's almost entirely absent from most seniors' plates. I understand the hesitation. Tofu has a reputation problem, seen as bland or unfamiliar. But a small serving of firm tofu carries a meaningful amount of complete soy protein with leucine content that compares favorably to chicken breast for around $1.50 for an entire block that stretches across 3 or 4 servings. Tofu also contains genistein, a naturally occurring plant compound that research has linked to activity along something called the mTOR pathway inside muscle cells, essentially the master control switch for muscle protein synthesis. Picture it as the operations manager of your muscle building system. That pathway tends to become less active with age, part of why muscles stop responding the way they used to, even when protein intake looks adequate on paper. Genistein appears to help partially wake that system back up. And research comparing soy protein with equivalent animal protein found noticeably greater activation of this pathway in the soy group. How to use it: press your tofu first, wrap it in a clean towel, set something heavy on it for about 20 minutes to remove excess water. This genuinely improves both texture and how well it absorbs flavor. Pan-sear it in a little avocado oil until golden, then season with soy sauce and fresh ginger. The ginger isn't just there for taste. A compound in it called gingerol has anti-inflammatory properties that may help create a more receptive environment for everything else at work here. Aim for tofu at lunch or dinner 4 to 5 times a week, a serving of roughly 2/3 of a standard block. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Robert, 81, a lifelong meat eater who came to me after a hip replacement with real muscle loss in both legs. His recovery had plateaued and his physical therapist was concerned. We introduced firm tofu 4 times a week alongside sardines and black beans. Within 4 months, his physical therapist described his recovery as noticeably faster than expected for his age. Robert, for his part, didn't care about the numbers. He just knew he could finally stand up from the toilet without using his hands. For him, that was everything. 1. Red lentils. And here it is, the food I promised you at the start. Under $2 a pound, eaten daily by some of the longest living populations on Earth, and connected to research on one of the core reasons muscle building becomes so difficult after 75. Red lentils are unusually rich in an amino acid called arginine. Here's why that matters. Arginine is the raw material your blood vessels use to produce nitric oxide, the compound responsible for relaxing and widening blood vessels, which means more blood, oxygen, and nutrients actually reaching muscle tissue. Nitric oxide production in blood vessels tends to decline noticeably with age, and less of it means slower delivery of everything muscles need to repair and grow, regardless of how much protein is on the plate. In other words, lentils don't just supply raw material, they help with delivery too. Research from aging-focused institutes has linked arginine-driven nitric oxide activity in older adults eating legume-rich diets to meaningfully better post-exercise muscle repair compared with those eating few legumes. But there's something else in red lentils that very few other foods offer in any real quantity, a compound called spermidine. I know, unusual name. Spermidine is one of the few naturally occurring compounds shown to support something called autophagy inside muscle cells, essentially internal cleaning crew, clearing out old, damaged cellular material and recycling it into new functional components. In aging muscle, a buildup of that damaged material is one of the real accelerators of decline, and spermidine appears to help send the cleaning crew in more effectively. Research following people with higher dietary spermidine intake over the years has linked it to noticeably better preserved muscle mass and physical function into their late 70s and 80s. Lentils rank among the richest everyday dietary sources of spermidine, alongside things like wheat germ and aged cheese. But lentils win on cost, protein, and their calming effect on inflammation all at once. How to use them? Choose red lentils specifically over green or brown. They cook down faster and blend more easily into soups and stews. Rinse them well, simmer in vegetable or chicken broth rather than plain water for extra flavor and nutrients, and pair with a squeeze of lemon. Vitamin C appears to help the body absorb some of the plant compounds here more effectively. Aim for a half to a full cup 3 to 4 times a week. Lunch or dinner both work well. What happened after Grace put it all together? Let me tell you about one more patient. I'll call her Grace, 74, who'd spent years quietly worried about her strength fading and genuinely didn't know where to start. We didn't overhaul her entire diet overnight. We simply layered in a few of these foods, gradually. Sardines twice a week, lentils a few times, tofu once or twice. Nothing dramatic, nothing that felt like a diet. 3 months later, she mentioned almost in passing that she'd started carrying her own groceries up from the car again, something she quietly stopped doing over a year earlier without really noticing. That's what happened next, and it surprised her more than anyone. Not a transformation, just her ordinary life quietly getting a little easier again. That's really what this whole video is about. Wrap up. Let's bring it together. Cottage cheese for slow, steady, overnight muscle repair. Canned tuna for an affordable leucine boost that hits the threshold aging muscles actually need. Black beans paired with rice for a complete plant protein that also calms gut inflammation. Sardines for carnosine, calcium, and CoQ10 in one small tin. Firm tofu for genestine's gentle nudge to a sluggish cellular pathway. And red lentils, my top pick, for arginine's role in blood flow and spermidine's role in cellular cleanup, a genuinely rare combination in one cheap, simple food. None of these foods work like a miracle switch, and I want to be honest with you about that. What they offer is a steady, cumulative advantage, small, affordable choices that add up over weeks and months into something that genuinely matters. Getting up from a chair a little easier, climbing stairs with a little more confidence, feeling steadier on your feet. If just one thing from this video sticks with you, let it be this. Pick one food from this list, just one, and add it to your routine this week. Not all 6, not a total diet overhaul, one small, consistent change. That's genuinely how most of my patients get real results. One addition that becomes a habit, rather than a plan that's too big to stick with. If this was useful, subscribe and tell me in the comments which of these 6 you're going to try first. I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself and take care of those muscles. They've carried you this far